Hello everybody and welcome back to the RPG with Cree. That's me. We're going to go ahead and get started with our next video here. So in the last video we went over some of the player classes and attributes and we started creating our shell for our project. We are going to come to the player and it'd be nice if we had some animations. Because right now, if we hit play and we walk around, we're just kind of facing down. It doesn't really make good for an RPG. So to get this started, all we have to do is come up into our sample scene and we're going to click on our player, and down here on the bottom we have animation and animator. If you don't see those on your screen, you can come up to window, come over to animation, and there's your animation and your animator. So we can click those and they'll come down here. If you need more room to work with this, we can also change the sizes in here, move it around so it's pretty for us. So anyway, we're going to go back to player, we're going to go to animation, and we're going to create an animation. So since this is going to be like a walking animation, we'll do a running later, but we're going to say player walking controller because this is going to be a controller. And we're just going to save that and make sure you come up into your assets and go to our animations, and we're going to save this in our controller file because we made this controller. So there we go. So let's come into this animation, and if we look at the controller, you can see here that there is a clip and there's an actual animator. So what do we need to do with that? We need to organize this so that the actual controller, which is right here, animator controller, and keep that in the controller, and we need to take this clip and put it into our clip folder, just so we can keep things organized and we don't have clips and controllers mixed and matched. So now that we have this done, we need to actually give it some fluency. So if we click on the player again, here's our player walking controller. Let's actually rename this player walk down, because that's how we'll start this. So player walk down. So now we can see here, if we come into our player and animation, we have player walk down. So how do we create animations? So if you load in your sprites, we come to our character. For the walk down, we need different phases. So we can come over here. I'm going to take these three. If you hold down shift, that's a hotkey, it'll select all these. So we're going to take all these walk down animations and put them right here. So now what can we do with that? So in order to have this running properly, we're going to have, we'll do 10-second intervals. So we'll take the right foot animation, put it there. We'll take this left foot animation and put it at 10. Then in between these, we need to have our normal idle animation. So we'll go to 20, and then we'll put another one at 40. So I'll show you what happens now. If we hit play, we can see the players walking fluidly. If I didn't put that last animation in there, it skips. So we need to make sure we keep this last animation in here, so if we're walking, it stays fluid. So we're going to go ahead and do this for other animations as well. So the best way to do this is to come in here and create new clip. If you came in here in this newer Unity and you tried duplicating these, it can cause some problems later on. So we're just going to hard code this. Now create new. We need to go to animations, clips. We got our walk down right there. So we're going to say player walk up. Save. We're going to create another one called player walk horizontal. So the reason we're not doing a left and right is because we can actually hard code in C# and mono develop the axis flip. So we don't need to do a left and a right. We can just use the same one and check with an if statement, and I'll show you how to do that later. So player walk horizontal. Okay, cool. Save that. So let's go back. We'll do our up first. Come over to sprites. Come to our character. Come all the way down. Let's find our up animation. Here it is. Same thing. Shift those three. We'll bring them in. And then we're gonna bring the right foot to 30. I'm gonna bring the left foot to 10. We're gonna drag in the idle, and then drag in the idle, just like last time. So we always check these and play these, and see we have an error here. So let's figure out what we did wrong. Click on these. I'm just gonna delete these and reload these in. So we'll do these one by one. I'm gonna do a walk up left foot on 10, walk up on 20, walk up right foot on 30, and then a walk up on 40. Let's play that animator again. And there we go. Nice fluid walk up. I don't know what happened there. I might have accidentally copied it when I clicked off of those. So just always play your animations and make sure that they're doing what you want to do. You can also space these out if you want a slower animation. But I think where I have it set now, this is a really good walk animation. So then we're going to go on to the next one here. I think our horizontal is the next one that we need. So same thing. We'll do the right. It doesn't matter. You can do right or left. It will check the axis later in the code. So we'll put those in there. Bring this one to 30. This one to 10. Put a standard in. And then a standard idle there again. So then we got a nice little walking animation horizontally. So as far as that goes, that's about all we need for the animation aspect. So now we can actually come into an animator. So for this animator, you can see that Unity automatically created this. But we don't want our game to start with the player walking. That's just not going to work. So we can come on here on this player controller, and we change that name to player walking down, I believe. So let's just update that name so we don't get confused. So we have player walk down, player walk up, player walk horizontal. So as I was saying, we want to organize these all like so. We're going to bring the player down, player up, player horizontal. Just space those out. They don't need to be perfect. I'm going to bring this entry down. So like I was saying before, we need something that'll tell us what to do when the game first starts. So we can do that by doing create state, empty state. And we're going to put this right on the bottom here. Sorry for my OCD. And we're just going to name it the player stand down. Because when we start the game, I want my player to be facing down. Excuse my spelling. And then after that, we're going to right click on this. And we're going to set this as a default state. So the Unity knows that this is the default that we want. So now when we're in any state, we're going to use any state to transition between our walking animations. So we're going to do the same thing, make transition, and we're going to make a transition to each one of these. Just like that. So now when you come in here, we have our actual animation here, but how do we want that animation to be active? So we come through here, and we have to update the settings on each one of these transitions. So we don't want a fixed duration because we're going to control that with code, and we don't want it to transition to anything else because we're going to do that with code as well. So you can see there's an error here, but we're going to add parameters to fix that. So before we do that, let's set all these the same. So 0, can't transition, turned off. And this last one, fixed duration, 0, can't transition, turned off. So what did I mean by parameters? So if you go into figuring the actual like movements, your up and your down is going to be on the y-axis. So it uses like 1 and 0 and -1 values. So 1 is going to be moving up, 0 is going to be doing nothing, and -1 is going to be moving down. Same thing on your x. It's going to be doing the left and right all the way through. But we're going to be using a bool on our horizontal and an int on our up and down. So we can come into here and we can make a new integer. So we're going to add that and we're going to call it y move. So we're going to detect which direction Y we're going. So now, when we're actually in here, we're going to put this Y move on all of these. This first transition, we're going to do the Y move, and we want this first transition to be less. So checks if it's less than, if it's not, or if it is less than 0, it'll walk down, so it'll be our -1. Then for walk up, what do you think we're going to do? We're going to do Y move, but we're going to do greater than 0, because if it's +1, he's going to be walking up, and that's exactly what we want. So what about horizontal? So I brought that up before, that we need to do a bool for an checking if it's walking left or right, because we're going to make a code to tell Unity to check which way the character's going. So we're going to call this X move. And we're just going to leave this unmarked. And then we can add that as a parameter or a condition to this animation. So we're going to go down here to X move, and we want this to be true. So it's going to be checking if it's moving along the x-axis. All right. As far as that goes for now, you should be able to play this. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens yet because we haven't added any code. So we have to come into Visual Studios, and we're going to do this on our character movement script. So here we are. So we already check for the movement in general. We give it velocity, we give it movement speed, and that's what moves us up and down. So what do we need to do in order to make this come to life? So we're actually going to use some if and else statements. So I will write this code for this, and then I'll explain it when we're done, or I'll explain it as we're going through it. So we're going to say if you tab twice in here, it does this. We already have something called move player horizontal. Or sorry, we're going to do vertical first, actually, because that's what we did first in Unity. So we're going to say if this does not equal 0, then we want the player anim, which we don't have an animator in here. So what do we need to do? We need to come up to the top here where we have our variables. We need to add an animator. So we're going to do a private animator, and we're going to call it player anim. And then we're going to make a sprite renderer as well to check which way our sprite is facing. Sprite renderer. And then we're just going to say player sprite image. Well, that sounds good to me. And like I said, you can make these anything you want. Just make sure you stay consistent in your code. So now, if we delete this and type it back in, it should pop up. Player anim, right there. And what do we want to say? We want to set the bool. With our X move. So it's checking the X movement, and we're going to set that to false. What else do we want to do in here? Also, we're going to check the sprite image. So player sprite image, and we're going to see if we're going to flip the X, which is going to determine the left or the right movement, and right here we don't. So this is going to be false. So inside of this if statement, we're going to write an if-else statement, or if and else if statement. So here we come, if, and then we're going to do else if, and we're going to put some parameters in here. So this first if statement, we need to check if the player is moving in the negative direction. So we're going to say move player vertical, and we're going to check if this value is less than 0. Less than 0. And this would be -1. So we're going to check if the player is moving down. So in here, we're going to say player anim. the player animator dot set integer to the y move, and we're going to set that to 1. Oh, sorry, it's greater than, not less than. So that's why we're setting it to 1, because this right here is greater than. So if this is greater than 0, and if it's 1, we're going to make him walk up. So this anim right here is the walking up animation that we created in Unity. So else if the move player vertical is less than 0, so walking down, we're going to say player anim dot set integer, and then this is going to be the y move again. Make sure this is capitalized just like it is inside of the script. If this is not the same as it is in the script, it will not work, because Unity is checking this text, just like it did with the vertical, how we were having problems moving up and down in the script yesterday. If this was lowercase, it has no idea what we're referencing to. So then this is going to be -1, so that we have the walk down animation. So we're going negative on the y plane. So that looks good for that so far. So then we need to do the horizontal. So we need another else statement. And we're going to say player anim dot set integer and we're going to say y move 0. So this is pretty much saying if it's not moving vertically, we're going to set it to do nothing. Oh, that's why there's an error, because I put that inside of there. There we go. So now that cleared that up, and we're going to put some if and else statements in here to check for horizontal movement. Daddy. So to start this, we're going to do an if, and we're going to do else if, and then if it doesn't check that else if, we're just going to do an else statement, and that should be good. So if we come here, we're doing our horizontal now. So move player horizontal, and we're going to say greater than 0. We're going to keep the same routine as the y. So if this is 1, I believe he'll be walking right, and that's how we set that up, because our animator is walking right. So if you had it opposite, you'd have to switch this. So this is how we're going to do it. So if he is moving right, we're going to say player anim dot set bool, and we're going to say x move, which is our bool, and we're going to set that to true, because remember in our transition in Unity, we had that x move set to true, so it knows that we're walking right. So then we're going to say that player sprite image, because remember how I said we were going to check if we were going to flip the sprite or not. We're going to say flip x, and we're going to set that equal to false, because we do not want to flip the sprite at this time. Okay, so now we're going to do walking left. So now we're going to say move player horizontal is less than 0, so he's going to be walking left. We're going to say player anim dot set bool, and we're going to do the x move parameter, and we're going to set this to true, because we're checking if we're walking horizontally, and we are, so that's true. And then we need to flip the sprite, so we're going to say player sprite image dot flip x, and this time we're going to make this a true statement so that the walk left animation triggers. All right, so now that we have that set, we need to do our final else to do the stationary walk, just like we did with the y. So else, we're going to say player anim, we're going to say set bool, we're going to do the X parameter through Unity, and we're going to set that to false because we are no longer walking left or right. Alright, so let's save this. We already have this script on our character, so we should be able to come in here. Just switch in programs here. There we go. And let this load in. Let's give it a whirl. Object reference is not set to the instance of an object. Let's see. Player engine. Y move 0. So the reason this isn't working is because we gotta come back into our script here, and I completely forgot to add 2 components. So we need to add player anim and set it equal to something. That's why it's having problems getting information. We need our animator in there. Animator. And then we're going to say get component, just like we did with the last one. We're going to do type of. And then we're going to say animator. Same thing. We need to call that same function for our sprite image equals sprite renderer. If I could spell right. Renderer get component type of sprite renderer. Alright, so we put that in here. Let's go back to Unity. Let this update. Game should play. And there we go. So we're walking. But if you notice, we don't stop walking. So we need to check and create a function for if our player is moving or not. Obviously, if we're not moving, we don't want to be animating. So how do we do that? We hop back over into our script, and it's actually a pretty simple little statement. It's not like all this that we just had to do. We're going to want to go in after we set the movement speed, but before we just did all that code. So we're going to say if, and then we're going to do an else statement as well. So else. So if the move player vertical is set to a value of 0, and if the move player horizontal is set to a value of 0. So that's what this double equal signs stands for. It's checking if the value is. It's not setting the value to 0, it's checking if the value is 0. So we're checking if we're not moving up and down, we're checking if we're not moving left or right. So if this is true, we want to have our player anim set bool, and we're going to create a parameter inside of Unity, and we're going to call it moving. And this is going to be false. And then else, it's going to be true. Player anim dot set bool moving, and then we're going to make this true. So this, what this is doing is it's checking if we're not moving. We want our character moving to be false. We don't want our character animating. But if he is moving, we want him to be animating. So we're going to set this bool to true. So we're going to save this, and then we have to go back into Unity and make those changes. So to do that, we're going to add a parameter here. We're going to make a bool. We're just going to call it moving, exactly like it is in the script. And then we have to create idle states. So we're going to go back to our animation, click on the player. We're going to add 3 new clips. We're going to call it player down idle, player up idle, and then player horizontal idle. Alright, so then we have to go into each one of these. We'll start with the down idle, and we have to go into our sprite. And this is just going to be our down idle, and we put it on 0, 0, and that's it. Same thing with the other two. So horizontal idle, we had our right, so we're going to do right. If you would put the left one in there and you would stop walking, the character would flip directions, and we don't want that. So we're going to come to up, we're going to find the face up sprite, put it on 0. So now we need to come into our animator, and it added all those. We're going to put these all next to where they go. So first we have down, and we have up, then we have our horizontal. Then we're going to transition these to the corresponding animations. And then in here, we're going to do the same thing as last. We're going to get rid of this exit time and turn the fixed duration off. We're going to set this to 0 for all of these. And then we're going to add that moving variable to all these. Like so. These, we're going to actually make these all false, because we're checking if we're not moving from the get-go, just like we did in our script. Alright, so let's save that. Let's give this a whirl. So there you can see, we walk left, animation goes, when we stop, it stops, same thing, up, stops, we walk down, stops, we walk right, it stops. So I have it set up right now in the code so that when we're walking diagonally, we see our faces instead of seeing our sides. That's just a personal preference for me. It looks good. So this about wraps up this video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe.